Joined by the Cabinet Office Minister David Lidington, a former Minister for Europe, advisor in the Foreign Office too, who's one of the Prime Minister's closest advisors now on Brexit. Good morning to you.
Morning.
We're told that you are cautiously optimistic. So why optimistic and why cautious?
Cautiously, optimistic, Nick, because we've managed to get things, the negotiators on both sides have managed to get things down to a small number of difficult issues that are still outstanding. They've worked incredibly hard. Both our team of negotiators under Ollie Robbins and Michel Barnier's team, the night before last, they were up until 2:45 in the morning working on this. Last night again, they worked well into the night trying to get things right. We're not quite there yet. This is always going to be an extremely difficult, extremely complex negotiation, but we are, I think, almost within touching distance now. But as the PM has said, it can't be a deal at any price. It's got to be one that works in terms of feeling we can deliver on the referendum result, and that's why there's a measure of caution, because as always in such a negotiation, the things that are left in square brackets in the text as the unresolved questions at the last stages are those that are the most knotty, most difficult ones to resolve.
We'll come to those in a second, but just to be clear, we are reading, if we're reading front pages, lots of pessimism, lots of talk of no summit in November, have to be December, votes in January. You're saying it is still possible, are you? Still possible, not at all definite, but that there will be a deal in the next 24 or 48 hours.
Still possible, but not at all definite. I think pretty much sums it up. Yeah. It's a cautiously optimistic, but we've been earlier in this negotiation thinking, we might perhaps we're on the point of the final breakthrough now, and other stages where we or the EU side have felt, we've really run into a roadblock, and then we found a way around that. So one's got to remain calm, but very focused, very determined on trying to get this work. I think what people in the country are wanting is for us to get on with this, to deliver a good deal that works for people in all parts of the UK, for our businesses, for our traders, manufacturers, and then forge a long-term new partnership with the EU27. They're going to remain key trading partners for us.
How real is the deadline that both sides say they're operating to, which is the end of Wednesday? We're told that is your deadline if you're to have a summit in November. Is it a real deadline, and what will be the consequences of missing it?
Well, there are decisions for ultimately for leaders. For President Tusk on the EU side, because he convenes the European summit, and some of this comes down both with us and with the EU to a matter of how you prepare for meetings ahead of an EU summit. Papers have to be circulated in time for the leaders' advisors to look at them, to prepare a brief for their leader, for the leader to comment on that. So there has to be a bit of time between something being ready to go to a summit and the summit convening. Sure. On the UK side, it's down to the question of Parliament here. That if we're leaving on the 29th of March, you count back from that to the amount of time we'd need, not just for the meaningful vote on the principle of a deal, if we get to that, but then for the legislation that is needed for us to ratify. That legislation has to go through both the Commons and the Lords.
Many people will say, look, there's always a way of sort of speeding up a meeting, or there's always a way of speeding up parliamentary legislation if you have to. Are you saying, because some have, that if you don't get a deal by Wednesday, on Thursday, real money starts getting spent on preparing the country to leave without a deal? Your former leader, former Foreign Secretary William Hague, says that is what you need to do by the end of this week if you haven't got an agreement. I'm
not going to put sort of dates or ascribed days to particular actions. What is true is...
You say you're not, forgive me for interrupting, but other people have. Yeah, Downing Street and others have said the end of Wednesday. So I'm just asking if it's real. The end of Wednesday
is important, but what we've been doing in government in the 2 years since the referendum is to take forward contingency planning against all eventualities. We both hope and we expect that a deal will be negotiated at the end of the day, but it would be irresponsible not to provide against the outcome we certainly don't want, which is a no-deal scenario. And there does come a point at which contingency plans have to be stepped up, simply so that in that eventuality, the preparations have been done, and so
you see,
that you
some
may
people
have to run
listening
the
to
two
you will
things in
say,
parallel.
I don't hear a hard deadline here. I hear a man desperate for a deal, they will say, at any price, despite the words you've just said, because they'll say, if you were serious about a negotiation, you'd say, Thursday, that's it. We don't get what we want. We're off. We're preparing for no deal. And that would be the way to concentrate the minds on the other side of the table.
I don't think that approach would be delivering what the British people want. I mean, the message, I think, that you get, whether you look at opinion polls or you just look feedback on the doorstep going around the country, is people say, look, democratic decision was taken in 2016. We want to remain friends. We want to remain really close trading partners. We don't want extra bureaucracy or tariffs at the ports. We want you to get on, get a good deal out of this, and then let's get on, forge that new partnership with our neighbours in Europe, but also press ahead with all those other issues, the health service, schools and crime and housing, that people are expecting us as a responsible government to be focusing on too.
Let me ask you then about what you called the small number of difficult issues that have yet to be resolved. Northern Ireland has always been the most difficult issue. Is there agreement on how the so-called backstop, the guarantee that there'll be no hard border, is there an agreement on how it could be terminated and by whom?
I mean, that, as the Prime Minister has said more than once in public, is one of the outstanding issues that is being negotiated in the end game. I mean, the irony of this is, I've talked in the last 10 days to both the Taoiseach of Ireland and his deputy, the Taoiseach, and they're both clear that they really don't want the backstop ever to be needed in practice. They want it as an insurance policy, but actually the Irish government says again and again, a backstop wouldn't sort out the hugely important east-west trade from Ireland to Holyhead and Pembroke Dock. They want a really ambitious trade deal between the UK and the EU 27 that will work for Ireland as well as for the UK.
But your problem, forgive me, is not with ministers in other governments, it's with ministers in your own government, with even the Brexit secretary apparently briefing newspapers that he thinks no deal is better than what Theresa May is currently arguing for. Have you heard him say that?
No, I haven't heard him say that.
Have you heard any of your colleagues around the cabinet table say that?
Actually, John, what I'm not going to, I'm afraid, going to talk about is the conversations that take place in cabinet. I've got a very old-fashioned view on this, that cabinet ministers should have their arguments, their debates, their discussions within the privacy of the cabinet room, listen to each other's point of view, come to a collective decision, and not talk about it outside. But
don't reveal what you say in the cabinet. Can you reveal what you say over the Lidington breakfast table when you read a newspaper? You read in the Telegraph that the woman in charge of getting the legislation through the Commons says no deal would be better than this, that the Brexit secretary is responsible, we thought, for negotiating it, but apparently not. He thinks no deal would be better than this. Have you ever heard them say that?
I talk to them a lot. Well, no, what I hear from all my colleagues, whether they campaigned for Remain or for Leave in 2016, is a determination to try to negotiate the best possible deal for the people of this country, because we all accept that whether we're talking about the Conservative Party or whether we're talking about the country as a whole, we've got to find something that works for the majority of people in both camps. The referendum was decisive, but the country was clearly very divided.
Let me put a couple of tests
that
to you,
works for both sides.
Couple of tests. Sorry to rush you along, but just in terms of getting some specifics then. The first thing that your cabinet colleagues want to know, and lots of other people, is that Britain, or the UK, I should be more precise, the UK cannot be trapped in a so-called backstop against its will. Does the Prime Minister agree? You will not sign a treaty that agrees to trap Britain in a backstop, even if it's a very unlikely possibility against
the Prime Minister said again and again that that it has to be, if the backstop were ever to be used, and we don't want it to be used, is that it's clearly got to be something that would be temporary, not indefinite. And after all, that's what the European Commission has said to us again and again. You cannot build a long-term future partnership on the basis of an Article 50 withdrawal agreement. Okay. Now, what I'm not going to do, Nick, is to go into details of what is still a very delicate negotiation about detail of phrasing, language in
Understood. Let me move you on to a different topic then. Is it a red line for you that Britain should be able to control fishing in our waters, even during this transitionary period to a new arrangement? Oh,
we've always been very clear. We've set out in in public how in the implementation period, should that be agreed, the rules on fisheries would be applied, and that so there's no secret
no doubt on that.
Was no secret about that. How
what
that
about
would
the
work
ability to
in
make
the implementation
trade
period?
deals? Because your colleagues are worried that the so-called backstop, a new customs arrangement, will in effect say that the UK cannot make any fresh trade deals with other countries at all, until and unless you get an entirely new trading relationship with the EU.
Prime Minister said again in her Mansion House speech last night that one of the things that she regards as essential in any deal is that we should have the ability to pursue an independent trade policy.
It seems to me that you have a draft deal here that is almost friendless, isn't it? People who are Remainers and Leavers say it would be worse than EU membership economically, and it would be worse than EU membership democratically as well. Can you honestly, hand on heart, say we will be better off if you get this deal agreed than we are now?
Well, as you know, Nick, I campaigned on the Remain side in the referendum, so I took clearly, on the record, of the view I took and campaigned for. But the people took a democratic decision, and I accepted before and subsequent to the referendum that while the result was close, it was decisive on a massive turnout, bigger than at any recent general election. And so, what we were always going to come up with if we get a deal, is something that will involve compromise. The Prime Minister can't have been clear about this. In all her major speeches, there will have to be give and take on both sides. This is something nobody is going to get exactly what they want on everything.
But so just to translate what you're saying is, I thought we'd be worse off if we leave the EU. I still think we'll be worse off if we leave the EU. But the people have voted for it, so be it.
People took a decision, having had the arguments both about the economics but also about sovereignty presented to them by the contending parties.
You could publish the economic advice you're getting from civil service, and then
2 years ago.
The
job that the government has, and which, in fairness, the Labour Party campaigned on as well in the 2017 election, was how to deliver the decision the British people had taken to leave the European Union in a way that best protected jobs and investment and prosperity in this country. That's what the Prime Minister is committed to doing, and she has always, in my experience of working with her, put the national interest first, ahead of personal or party or career interest or anything like that. What is going to deliver the best results for the future of everybody in the UK?
David Lidington, thank you.